Welcome to VASLing with Stu. This is a continuing series of ASL replays created for the enjoyment and learning benefit of new and experienced ASL players using the VASL interface. The goal of these videos is to experience a complete face-to-face game following every shot and move between myself and my opponent. Before actual gameplay, I'll present a brief history of the battle and introduce the scenario. Although these videos are not designed to be tutorials, I'll pause the replay to explain certain rules and concepts as they appear during the course of the game. Now check your gear and let's move out to the next battle. Episode 5 is ASL 36 Rachi Ridge, which is contained within the West of Alamein module. West of Alamein is the desert expansion to the ASL system, which is far out of print and is unlikely to be back in print anytime soon. A lot of players just didn't really get into the desert system, so you're probably missing a lot, but that's up to your personal tastes. If you do want the British, and I encourage you to obtain the British, pick up for King and Country. It contains a lot of other scenarios that can play the British, obviously, and also the British are necessary to play in the PTO Theater of Operations, which is the Rising Sun remix and reprint of the Chinese and Japanese modules, which are absolutely outstanding. If you're tired of Germans and Russians, feel free to pick up the British. I think the British are one of the best nationalities to play. They have a lot of great advantages and disadvantages, mainly in their armor, but they are a great nationality and they're a lot of fun to play. Let's take a look at what the scenario has to offer us for today's game. Here we are at the Bug River from episode 4 at Yasnaya Polyana. Now let's head towards the Mediterranean in early September 1943 and see how the British are handling the Germans in the Aegean Sea. At their announcement of their armistice of the Italian garrisons on most of the Dodecanese islands, either wanted to change sides or fight with the Allies or just return home. However, in anticipation of the Italian surrender, German forces, based largely in mainland Greece, had been rushed to many of the islands to gain control. The island of Rhodes was the administrative center of the Dodecanese Islands and possessed 3 military airfields. Because of this, Rhodes was the principal military objective for both the Allies and the Germans. The day after the Italian surrender, the British delegation was dropped by parachute on Rhodes in order to persuade the Italian commander to join the Allies against the Germans. The swift action of the German forces, however, preempted the Allies. Without waiting for the Italians to decide, the Germans attacked the 40,000-strong Italian garrison on September 9th and forced it to surrender by September 11th. The loss of Rhodes dealt a critical blow to the Allied hopes of gaining a strong control of the area. Despite the setback, however, the British High Command pressed ahead with the occupation of the other islands, especially the 3 larger ones, Kos, Samos, and Leros. The Germans were known to have overstretched in the Aegean, while the Allies enjoyed definite superiority at sea, and air cover provided by 2 Spitfire squadrons at Kos was deemed sufficient. The Germans, having identified the vital role of the Allies' only airfield at Kos, they started carrying out bombing raids on it and on the Allied positions on the island. On October 3rd, the Germans effected an amphibious and airborne landings, and Kos surrendered the next day. The fall of Kos was a huge blow to the Allies, since it deprived them of their only air cover. In the aftermath of Kos, the Italian garrison of Kalymnos surrendered, providing the Germans with a valuable base of operations against their next targets, Leros. Leros had been subjected by the Luftwaffe to a prolonged aerial bombardment, starting on September 26, which already caused significant casualties and damage, both among the defenders and among the supporting naval forces. In the early hours of November 12th, the invasion force in 2 groups approached the island from the east and west. Despite failures in some areas, the Germans established a bridgehead while airborne forces landed on Mount Rachi. The British, meanwhile, respond by sending the Royal Irish Fusiliers to intercept and dislodge the Germans from the ridge. Seeing how the ridge is such a small area of this section of the island, it's real critical for the British to maintain control. Get your chutes ready, and let's drop in on the action on Rachi Ridge. Not surprisingly, the game begins with a German airdrop on top of the ridge. What may surprise you, however, looking on turn 3 and 4 reinforcement schedule for the British, they have units coming on boards then. Before then, they have none. So this is the easiest scenario for you to set up. The Germans come on airdrop, and the Brits don't even show up till turn 3. So if you're ever going to be late to a scenario, this is the one that you want to be, and you'll be the British, and you'll have 3 turns to get there by the time your opponent finishes his turn. So stop by and get some extra beverages and pretzels to make up for your tardiness, and maybe you won't mind so much. So the Germans here, what they seek is they seek control of the top of the hill and simply have an LOS to board 18 edge, the east side, which is in our scenario the top of the map. And the Brits obviously just have to deny them that LOS. But having the 13 squads is going to be quite a chore in this particular scenario. Any one of those units, including half squads, it doesn't say full squads, it just says no good order multi-man counter. So it has to be any half squad or more. Only one of them needs to have LOS to that board edge for the Germans to win. So if the Germans should happen to have a very good airdrop in this scenario, lands on top of the hill, they could set up and have all the machine guns ready to cut down the Brits when they come on. And if they have a bad airdrop, then they'll have to make their way to the hill. And if anyone's experienced with board 25, as you'll see, it's a treacherous hill to go up. There's lots of gullies, or wadis in this case. There's very little difference between the two, but it will give you an opportunity to advance up the hill without of LOS, but it will take a lot of movement factors to do so. So you'll see that during the game. Board 25 is a wonderful board to play on. You'll get used to expending tons of movement factors and CXing 1 hex, and it's a very interesting board to play on, unlike board 2, which is their standard, old school hill. Scenario again, the Brits don't come on until turn 3, but there are 7 special rules that we can go over. The only ones that are real difference are board scenario special rule 2 just changes all the woods to brush, and you'll see the beautiful rendition in VASL, which is a huge advantage VASL has over the face-to-face play. And scenario special rules 3 and 6 are really the key ones to the game. The other ones are very minor, entrenching modifiers and such. But number 3 gives the British level A booby trap capability on both boards, and that booby trap capability fades as the game goes on. And this booby trap capability reflects random AA fire, is what I believe the scenario specifies. During the first 3 turns, both boards are affected. After turn 3, board 18 is excluded, and after turn 6, booby trap capability no longer exists for the Brits. So that's a nice little scenario special rule that the designers developed, and seems to work actually rather well in this scenario. Scenario special rule 6, what that entails is any German units that happen to have drifted off the board, that are still off the board by the time the Brits come on, the Germans are essentially, all Germans off board are eliminated, but what they do is essentially they practically make a 1-for-1 exchange for units coming on. So it's almost like they intercepted British units and they killed them on the way, getting killed in the same instance. So that's kind of a nice little scenario special rule. It's about a paragraph long, not that difficult to comprehend, but essentially anybody left off board is going to kill British units. So that's a kind of a fun one, kind of a nice one. So if you just happen to get a bunch of units off board, you really don't get really messed over by not having guys on the board. So let's take a look at some specific items that both sides have to look forward to and take into account in order to have a successful game. Alright, Outpost, listen up to the objectives for today. British objectives and concerns. Advancing over open sites. After the Germans have landed on the board, they will have 3 turns, or pretty much 2 turns, because the first turn is the initial airdrop, to get their machine guns ready and either set up a defense, depending on where they drop, or head back towards the hill. Either way, you're going to be advancing on some Germans with some serious machine guns capabilities. They have 2 mediums, 4 lights, so that's far enough range for you to be subject to horrendous fire and harassing fire as you make your way to the hill. Time, as in any scenario, you need to look at the time sequence that you have to complete your objectives. Germans have 10 turns to get their stuff done. British only have 8 turns. I think 7 or 8 turns. They come on turn 3, and the game ends on turn 10. So the Germans will have 2 more turns of essential movement if they have a bad airdrop, or if they have a terrific airdrop, it's going to make it really difficult on the British. And don't spit into the wind. This is probably the most important aspect of the scenario. German or British squads have a smoke exponent of 2, which is absolutely fantastic for a first line squad. The problem is the wind direction. The wind direction comes from the west, which is the direction where the Brits are heading towards. So none of the British squads can place smoke, their infantry smoke, mind you, upwind. So nothing in front of them they can place. They can throw it behind them and cover for their buddies behind them, but they can't throw it in front of them and cover their advance, which is still going to make them subject to machine gun fire. One thing you got to double check with those wind conditions and your A24 smoke summary. Effect on counter mild breeze, note little g. So read that note G. It's very critical. If you forget that one, then you're probably going to have a huge advantage in this one. German objectives and concerns. Always, always, always the accuracy of the airdrop. You have 2, I think maybe 3 wings in this particular scenario. The 50-50 shot whether they're on target, and after they're on target they can drift in any number of directions. So that's the beauty of the airdrop, is it's complete and utter chaos, and with a mild breeze going, you're going to be drifting quite some an additional distance. So we'll cover that in detail, and hopefully you'll begin to appreciate the airdrop. Airdrops are actually a whole lot of fun for the players that really don't like, to lose complete control over their units. They have a tendency not to like airdrops, but I've got a couple scenarios. Hopefully I'll have another scenario later that shows another airdrop under fire, and they are actually a lot of fun. The best thing about it is if you have a really crappy airdrop, you can just restart the scenario, because the airdrop is typically the first thing that happens. Next thing the Germans got to look for is the horrendous terrain, and particularly the initial AA fire. The horrendous terrain is going to be the hill. The board 18 is really not going to be that big of a deal, but moving up that hill, if they don't land on the hill, will take a lot of extra time, and if that time is used for moving up the hill, most likely they won't have that time to set up the machine guns and set up good fire, points of fire to pick off the Brits as they're coming up the hill. And the last concern for the Germans is grab it all or just focus on one major hill area. You'll see that they're the level 4 hills on 2 different areas of the board 25. So go for both, go for one. The choice is yours, and of course that's dependent upon the accuracy of your airdrop. And remember, you only need LOS from 1 multi-man counter, so go for 2 and you'll have a much better chance of surviving a British counterattack. Alright, well, let's go to it. Grab that chapter E and let's go take that ridge. Alright, the pilot circled around and has determined that these are going to be our drop points for the upcoming scenario. I will be playing the British in this scenario. My opponent, obviously, the German Fallschirmjägers. Let's go over just a few pieces of terrain that might be new to some players that aren't familiar with the desert, and I'll just describe what their immediate effects are in this scenario. Most of it has to do with a lot of vehicle adjustments. We won't even bother to cover that. So let's just zoom in on a couple spots. The paths you see here on the map board, instead of being roads, these are denoted as paths, and what that essentially what we'll do during this game is eliminate the road bonus rate for infantry, and that's pretty much all it's going to do in this game. It does a couple other things, but we won't go into that. Other terrain on board 18 is unchanged, other than changing the woods to brush, and that's on both boards. On board 25, we have a couple of hexes that we might be unfamiliar with. These hexes here, V1, W1, and olive groves, essentially they're the same as orchards, except they give a +1 terrain effect modifier, and they're double the movement cost to enter. And these hexes here are Armada hexes, and the dust hexes next to it we can ignore because those apply to vehicles. But the hexes themselves with the rocks with the green are Armada, and essentially what they will do is they will yield a -1 terrain effect modifier for any high explosive attacks going in there, and in this scenario it's only going to be affected by mortar fire. Other than that, it has no effect on combat. The crags are normal +1. The only other terrain change is you see all these gullies on both boards, and especially here on board 25. The gullies in this scenario are defined as wadis due to the theater of operations. The only change that we're going to have between a normal gully and a wadi as it applies to this scenario is that wadis allow medium or any support weapon by infantry for that matter to be fired from crest status, whereas a normal gully disallows anything higher than a light machine gun, so mediums and heavies may not fire from crest status in a normal scenario and with gullies, but wadis do allow that. I think they're considered to be deeper grooves in the earth, and so the slopes might be higher. So that's pretty much all the terrain that you have to look at, and these are kind of nasty looking, but -1 terrain effect modifier for high explosion, and that's all you have to worry about. So the victory conditions in this scenario, of course, level 4, the Germans have to occupy with a multi-man counter on level 4 hexes on board 25, and they have to have an LOS to the eastern side of the map, which is any ground level on board 18. So we've denoted the particular scenario, the specific hexes that will allow those victory conditions to occur. So BB5, P6, and P and Q7. These array of hexes here, but not these two hexes behind because they simply don't have LOS to that side of the board. Now M6 and N6 are special exceptions here. They are wadi or /gully. I'll be pretty much interchanging the usage of those, so just bear with me. So M6 and N6, to have an LOS out of those hexes, you'd have to be in crest status to be able to see this side of the board edge hex. I'm not sure if you were in M6 you could try an LOS from M6 to that board edge. Actually you couldn't, because if you look at it, if you're in the gully wadi of M6, you're going to be at the same level as the hill in N5, and so that will create a plateau effect and therefore negate that hex, as well as N6 as potential LOS spots to the board 18 edge hex. But if you were in crest status, you would be at one level higher, which would be at level 4. So those are two special, very special hexes in this game that we have to plan for. Alright, let's get straight to the paratroop drop. Paratroop drops are fairly simple. What you do is you have your array of squads. Typically you put them in a cloaking box, but here we're really not that concerned about having to be cloaked because it's a friendly game. And the British are not on board anyway, so the Germans are going to drop, regroup, and start moving prior to the British, or in this case the Irish players' arrival on the board. We have wings that are set up. Each wing is comprised of 5 sticks, so that will be counters of multi-man counters. So each of these large 5/8 inch counters represents one of these multi-man counters or more if you have a leader stacked with them. So in this case, A is this one, B, C, D, and E, and then A and B for support weapons, and so on and so forth, and you just go F, G, H, and then K, L, M. So we have our first wing here, second wing, and our third wing. normally before setup you place your center parachute on your drop zone, and that's going to be your attempted drop zone prior to you landing on the board. So after you set up your wings, then at that point you go in the movement phase, you go ahead and roll a die. It's a 50-50 chance, so 1 through 3 or 4 through 6, however you really want to do it, doesn't really matter, odd or even. Go ahead and select roll for each wing, and if it's accurate, which is 1 through 3, let's say, then it will land or be placed on this hex. If it is a 4 through 6, the other half, then it will be dispersed to a different location. My opponent happened to have, this is actually the dispersed location from his initial landing hexes, and but he actually came very close to where he applied normally. So how do you find out where your, if we miss, how do we find out where we're going to go at that point? Well, VASL in this case has hex row selection device here, but the first thing you do is you roll a random die, and that will determine on an equal basis on which board you'll land on. Since we have 2 boards here, it's a 50-50 chance to land on 18 or 25. In this case, they both landed on 18. And then what you would do then is, if you're in VASL, you would simply select that button there, and it's a chit generator, and it tells you what hex row that your Paratroop drop zone will be in. If you are playing a normal game, a face-to-face game with actual counters, then you'd have to pull out all of your drift counters, and I think all of the drift counters go up from 80 GG. So you'd have to pull those out, randomly draw those from a box or a chit or a coffee mug, whatever you'd like to choose, and that will select your hex row. And at that point you roll a d6, and then you add 2 to the result, and that will be the center portion of that particular drop zone for that wing. So in this case, if wing H right here in 18L7, let's say he missed his drop zone and he happened to land on board 18 again with a random die roll selection, you draw chit C, so he'd be put in C hex row, and you would add 2 to your subsequent die roll, and that would be the hex that he would land in. So he would be in C5. Let's just say so his location would be in C5, and then his stick would land along this row here, and then he would do drift from there. And then you continue on with the other wings that you have. So let's go on with the dispersion method. After your wings are in their final drop zones, you simply do essentially a sniper check. If assume the sniper check's activated, and you roll extent and direction and extent. And if you look on the counter, it will have drift modifiers. So the direction is extent is 2 dice rolls. One's obviously one for the direction, the other one's number of hexes. And then for the Germans, the extent is halved, but for the Russians, the extent is increased by 50%. So Russians dropped higher, Germans dropped lower, and those are to account. Everyone else kind of dropped in between, I guess. But that's what we're going to have modifiers here. When you are airdropping your units, your support weapons drop separately from your multi-man personnel counters. So that's what these small ones are. So if you had a bazooka, dismounted mortar, in this case the Germans pretty much only have machine guns, and they're indicated by these. That's what these are dictated, and they will drift separately. Now you might be wondering, Stu, why did your opponent select that board to get on, or at least randomly have those other boards on? When you drop a parachute, if you land in essentially, I want to classify it as hard terrain, which would be buildings, woods, crag I believe is inclusive, olive groves I'm sure is inclusive, then what you'll do is you'll undergo morale checks when you land on that hex. And as you see on board 25, most of that entire board is covered with that bad landing terrain. So in this case, even though he's not on his objective, he's probably chosen a better spot to land, because there's only like 5 different hexes here that he can land on. That's going to force a morale check, or possibly these over here of course, and cause him to possibly break when he lands. So this is his best chance of remaining good order and coming on that particular board edge. So Let's go ahead and start our dispersion, and we'll just burn through this. Remember, 2 dice, direction and extent, and we'll just fly through where these guys are going. That's a support weapon there. Oh, and it drifted up 2 hexes there. You saw that. In the next one, you can see, watch the second one. It drifts 1 and goes up 2. Why does it go up 2? Well, the rules dictate that the wind direction, or the wind, is a mild breeze. So in mild breeze, you're going to drift 2 hexes in that direction of the wind. So in this case, he drifted direction 6, either a 1 or 2 extent, and then after that, he'll drift along with the wind. So the wind's blowing everybody to the east side of the board, and possibly even off the board. So let's go ahead and back up and complete the airdrop. And remember, it's very simple once you set it up. I won't bother defensive fire. Of course, hazardous movement for all airdrops or paradrops. Since there are no enemy units on the board, none of them are going to be subject to defensive fire. And matter of fact, if any of your units, if you happen to play a scenario with any of your units firing on paratroopers and they are concealed, and no other units have LOS to that unit firing with the concealment, that unit will not lose concealment, because concealment lost is based upon LOS to a ground unit. So paratroopers coming down are not ground units yet, so you can fire to your heart's delight and not lose concealment. This is a dispersion pattern here. 1 unit landed off board, 3 hexes. Off board landing by paratroopers. The terrain is based on the avenue of approach, and the avenue approach is not defined by the wind direction, but by rather the direction the paratrooper dropped off the board. It really doesn't specifically state it in the rules, but I've talked to a number of very knowledgeable individuals, and that's the way it kind of goes. Now, of course, each paratrooper can land in a different direction, going left, right, straight. So, but that's the easiest to depict it. So every hex he lands off board movement is 1 hex per turn. So this unit will take 3 turns to be able to get back on board, 3 hexes of movement, and then 1 hex of advance to get him on the board. And that happens to be where our British reinforcements come on. But Scenario Special Rule 6 allows Germans to stay off board if they wish, and they will be eliminated, but yet they will inflict casualties on the British as they before setup. So my opponent, I believe, selects that option. All these other support weapons here, if they're grounded, you can see you flip them to unknown status. So those particular hexes that contain those small half-inch counters are not known to either side. Well, the German can look at as cloaking box, but the enemy side can't determine what those are until they actually recover those weapons. So they won't know that's an LMG or medium or mortar or something like that. So I kind of like that rule with the half-inch counters. So when the paratroopers drop on the board and their final destination hex is determined, the Germans, all other nationalities except for the Germans, can move 1 extra hex in any direction that they choose, but the Germans have to stay in the hex they land in, and that's the adjustment that you're not going to see here for those that know the paratrooper rules very well. So if you are not landing in hard terrain, so the only hard terrain we have here is this 18L9, which is the support weapon, and S1, which are multi-man counters, and that's the C group, which happens to be ABC, or 9-2 leader. So all the other units that are not landing in terrain that is considered hard have to take task checks when they drop on the ground to determine whether or not they will involuntarily deploy and in the direction of the wind direction. So that's what we're going to go through now. And the Scenario Special Rule 3, I believe, with regards to booby traps, any task check of 11 or more will cause casualties. So this first turn is a really large, big turn, important turn, because the Germans going to be rolling a ton of dice and will be subject to those task check casualties during this particular turn. So I'm not sure why that path is bouncing around. Units that are landing in hard terrain, and because you're landing in, I'm sorry, let's drop back. Because you're landing in mild breeze, then what will happen is that task check will be a 1-level task check. In heavy winds, it will be a 2-level task check. Accordingly, landing in hard terrain would be a 1-level morale check and a 2-level morale check if it's heavy winds. But we're only subject to mild breeze, so the C units will be subject to a 1 morale check, and support weapons landing on those, I believe, undergo morale checks, and if they fail, it becomes malfunctioned. And I think that's actually what happens. It's kind of interesting. So we burn through here. We discuss that unit has to take morale checks because it's in hard terrain. And then we start popping counters. You might see some coming on board. Oh, here we go. They start showing up on top first. This one happened to fail his task check and is then deployed. If you happen to have a leader with your squad, as it's being, if it fails its task check, then that leader is randomly assigned to one of those squads, whether it's going to be the drifting multi-man counter or the one in its initial location. So it's a random whether or not the leader splits with one or the other. So that's kind of cool too. Remember, a lot of players don't like to play with paratroopers simply because your landing areas can be extremely random and not under your control whatsoever, as you see here. Normally, we go through the movement phase. We're eliminating the parachute counters. You shouldn't do that. To keep a reminder of the units that are on board. You may not advance fire when landing in parachutists, and you get no route phase. So if you land broken, you stay where you are. Even if adjacent to an enemy unit and you are not subject to failure to route, you just land broken next to them, which isn't good anyway. And the advance phase is when you remove the parachute counters, the 5/8 inch parachute counters from the board, and at that point they become normal infantry. And then close combat phase is, if you can apply for concealment gain if applicable. So we just happen to remove those, I think, a little bit earlier. And then he rolls for concealment, and some make it, some don't, because they're in non-concealment terrain, of course. This is turn 2. No prep fire because no enemy units are on board. He moves to recover LMGs and all of his support weapons, and hopefully to get with his leaders, so he can make a way towards his victory conditions over here and get away from this edge where the green line here denotes where the bridge player, which is me, is where the reinforcements are coming on. So he's here on turn 2. I can actually come on this side here, on this south side here, on turn 3, and my 9-2 comes on the south side or the top side on turn 4. So I'm going to be coming on where the green is, and he's got to make it back to board 25. Let's continue. He just starts moving around, starts picking up his units, CXing, moving units next to his leaders, moving with his leaders so he can get that fast movement back to the hill. Does his advances, concealment gains, and we'll run to, I think he may or may not be combining units. Hold on. Yeah, it might be combining units in the rally phase. Ally turn 2 is nothing, obviously. Axis turn 3. The unit off board you see on top. Up here is his unit that he's off board. He could advance here next turn, but he chooses not to. He's going to stay off there and inflict casualties, early casualties. So these other Germans, not having any enemies to fire at them, just continue to do their merry thing. And I start setting up my units on the left-hand side, or the right-hand side rather, and he just starts moving units back and possibly to areas where he needs to set up his defense prior to my arrival. So as you see here, he's running for the hills, literally running for the hills, and makes it there with the advance phase. I believe this is his advance phase. Yep. Jumps on all those buildings. Half his units are on, half the units are off. So the allies, which is me, sets up off board. The off board setups might look a little screwy up here. So I apologize for that. It's a different version. I'm running under VASL, so some units will be kind of messed up, but they will pop into play as appropriate. So I set guys up off board. So what's going to happen here is when he starts moving on this hill, you say, oh, this is going to be an easy scenario for the Germans too, because heck, they're already at the base of the hill. The British got to cover this open ground, pretty much open ground. They're going to get shot, and the Germans going to have their easy way of getting up on top of that hill. But the British player will have a few machine guns that wish to fire upon him, one HMG and a couple mediums and a couple mortars. So the range will be there. And going up the hill, as you pass LOS, say a unit goes from M2, the danger is say a unit goes from M2 to M3, any LOS that follows that slope going up that passes through those two hexes is considered open ground. So he'd have to move from the side or any other location to avoid that -1 movement in the open modifier, and which is key. So my opponent here is going to jump into the wadis and make his way up. Of course, wadis move like gullies, and each wadi hex entered is 2 MF, and if you go up a level, you're going to be paying an extra penalty. So movement from O3 here to N3, as you see, will be 4 MF, because that's going to be at this particular level. And this N3 unit here, technically in the gully, is at ground level. So that's only a one level increase, 1 level increase, same level, 1 level increase. But remember, it's going to be a lot of movement factors going up there. That's a 4 MF movement. And if you wanted to go to M4, that's a 2 elevation change. That will also be a 4 movement factor movement. So it's going to be really slow going for him unless he's got a couple leaders with him. So his safest route is up through the gully, not to get shot at, but that will be his costliest route of movement. So we'll see what he does there, and that would probably be his best choice. Let's get some units back on the board. Zoom out. Let me see if the British are coming on yet. It appears to be the rally phase. Okay. So rally phase 3, I've set up my British units here. A few units on top. There's a couple stacks here, small stacks, and a couple small stacks over here. The counters are kind of messed up, but bear with me. And probably 5 or 6 units coming on this right side. You'll see them coming on in just a second. Let me go ahead and move some of these guys on. This is actually a stack of units. There's like an error going on there, so yes, I don't have the mild breeze attacking. And other units up. So here, right here, obviously you should have a concealment counter on him. I'm moving this 447 down the road, and I make the mistake of entering that hex. I thought that hex would be out of LOS, but my opponent reminds me that it isn't, because he opens up with his units in the middle of the road. The big stack there. And he decides to roll fairly low and just straight out eliminate me with a -2 modifier. These other units, that's actually a stack there. That's another miscue by the different variations of VASL games I'm running here. And so he decides to defensive fire from H3 with his medium machine gun. And you say, hey Stu, how the heck is he going to shoot you from there? Well, if you take in, for instance, that these are not woods, these are just brush, and that these are a lower level, so this hedgerow doesn't even come into play. That may have confused me at the time. And H3, if you look at that LOS, that is a straight on LOS to P9. So keep your eyes peeled for that, guys. Anytime there's a terrain change, and usually it's woods to brush, that's really going to open up some firing opportunities, especially on these one-level hills crossing one another. Although it doesn't apply here, it will apply later. So that's a straight-on shot, range of 10, with the 4 attack factor. So that's a great shot by my opponent. Very smart and very astute to be able to catch that shot. Sometimes he might be waiting for other units to move. So I had a large stack there. Again, moving in stacks is dangerous. He ends up pinning most of it, breaking 1 unit. But essentially he stops that unit from moving. So that's a 2 hex movement during that turn. And he stops that whole stack from moving. Units behind the hill, as you see on the top right here, they're going to be completely immune to fire as they approach that hill due to the elevation, plateau effects. Other units on the right hand side, as you see, coming in sharp and fast. A couple mortars, other squads showing up, a whole slew of units, and they're all concealed. Let's zoom out a little bit here. This unit advanced fires. We go directly to the advanced fire phase. Not a lot of advanced fire, just firing back at that medium, see what happens. Routing and advancing as applicable. Advance all those units on top of the hill. Sure, they didn't have LMGs before, but they were there. Again, it's just another miscue. Advance units on the right hand side in open LOS, simply because I need to get units out and fast, and if I break, I could just drop behind the hill. So technically there's no building or woods there, but that's going to be my essentially route hex, would be B2. So out of LOS, I plop a leader down there. I'm not going to get the rally terrain bonus, but that will be a very, very safe location for any broken units to run to, or to route to in this case. And so all my units advance, lose their concealments as long as they're in LOS. This unit is in LOS to I3, so they lose all concealments. I take that risk simply because I kind of need to, and I need to get some firepower on those units. Get some sort of intensive fire on those units. And then it turns out to be, have we turned the Germans to a close combat phase? Concealment gains, I don't think there are any. So we go to the German turn 2, or German turn 4 actually, my bad. He starts firing units here. Let's take a look at the German's defensible position here. He's got his medium on that location. This medium, as you saw, has LOS to this location. Probably a couple spots on the road here. And then anything on this hill and the open ground ahead of it, and the entire side on the right. So he's covering one half of the board with one support weapon. That medium machine gun right there. His LMG stack is right in the center. He can either jump to this bottom hill here and do the same thing, is cover that entire third or half of the board there, or he can just jump on top of this hill here and maintain a magnificent fire base, stopping any types of British, or in this case Royal Irish Fusiliers from advancing to our destination hexes down here. So this is his cutoff force, his delaying force, and we'll see how well he performs during the game. And that's a great thing. Throw a lot of your weapons there, a lot of your high firepower weapons, and get those boys going and delaying them as much as possible. I've got a lot of firepower up there. He shoots, fires what he can, most pins, return fire. I actually get a broken unit there, so that was great. A broken and a pin. So that was an excellent shot. He continues to move. No effect. The units on the left-hand side continue to move up the hill. They're in the wadi, so they're immune to fire. Can't see anybody. These other guys are out of LOS. He might be an LOS from that unit up there, and I think I do take a shot at him. Yeah, that's a clear LOS shot from there. As you can see, that's kind of a tight one, but it is there. Wow. Yeah, it looks like it barely misses that hill. See that? P7 barely misses that hill, so that is a tight shot at 9 hex range. That's going to be halved, but a 2-2 on these Fallschirmjägers. You gotta take what's given you. And then I don't think any effect was there. The Germans continue to fall back and set up his defenses upon the hill. I get a couple lucky first fire shots, break and casually reduce him by rolling pretty low. I think I rolled 2 4s, so 1 4 is a morale check, probably 1 morale check, and the other one's probably another 1 morale check. That he happened to roll poorly and was eliminated. So that was a great shot from those Irish on top of that hill, right, being led by Hannafin. A couple other final fire shots. I unfortunately caused that leader to go heroic. Not good, especially early in the game. routing phase for the Germans. And let's see that route there. I thought that route was an illegal route, but I'm not sure. He was here. And oh no, LOS to there blocks that hill. If that, obviously, if he had, that would be an LOS. It actually kind of looked like it was an LOS to me. And but upon further inspection, J2 is obviously blocking that LOS. So he's not with an LSO here and can route towards our nearest location, which is that fine building right there, and which will turn out to be a problem to me because that is the best defensible terrain on that entire board, other than the +3 one. But that's excuse me, going to serve no purpose. So excellent idea, just excellent eye for him to be able to spot that and route that direction. Of course, these units here, plateau effect, may not see over the level 1 hill because they're on the level 1 hill. Other units are advancing for routes, and then it's advances. I think they're pretty much standard advances. He's consolidating the forces on the hill. He's a little intercepting force, and the LMG here in the middle occupies that wooden building. Nice defensible central location. Again, 8 hex range, 1, 2, 3. Fires the entire way to the gully and over here with hindrance. So he's covering this particular advance directly up the hill. Now my idea was to send most of my forces this way and a good chunk of them right here to hopefully penetrate and stop these units from being able to retreat and making a concerted effort to get up on the hill. These units in the village here, concealed units, and the other 548, I'm worried about those units occupying multiple locations throughout the entire hill in order to try and dislodge those. Instead of having one central location that I have to worry about, if he occupies 3 separate locations, it's going to really split my units up. So I set a large contingent over here, and the next turn I'll get a 648s coming on as well. Over here is going to be a stack of units. Obviously it's not on yet, and I do have a 447 that's hidden over here, but he'll show up very, very soon. These forces here are essentially just following forces just to keep the pressure on. Maybe that was unnecessary. Maybe all these units right here, the LMGs, could have gone in the gully and followed this area right here, which is a nice location. But if he gets a big fat machine gun here in V2, then he could cause a fire lane straight down this row. So as you see, the approaches to the hill are many, but they're all open ground terrain except for the brush right here. This is the easiest approach right here, and that's why I'm sending my best leader and some decent troops in that direction. But it's going to be difficult getting up that hill. Essentially, you're going to bottleneck right up in this location here. This location over here is to hopefully stop any easy access to BB5. Again, straight up the hill, real easy to get to. So that's hopefully I'll be able to claim that prior to the Germans. Continuing on, my allied comes in, prep fire comes, the rally, and I fire smoke right there. You're saying, Stu, why are you firing smoke? You missed your target. You've got plenty of other targets over here to fire at. Why aren't you firing right there? So what I'm going to do here is I'm firing smoke here. Got a lucky roll to stop these guys from firing on these units going to approach. So now that's going to have other than the nice hindrances from here, these other units may not be hindered as well, especially this unit. So fire smoke here, and you'll see in the advance phase exactly what happens. Other units continue to prep fire over there. No effect. Actually, I do break him, so I get lucky. And then other units on top follow up with more prep firing. Get tons of breaks. Look at this stack. Look at this entire central force. One single man counter that is alive. The rest of them are just broken units. So I'm looking pretty good right now. Feeling really good about myself. So I start just throwing these units into the mix. Just running them down the road. Move as fast as possible before those units come up. And try to mob those units. Here's my 447 on the right hand side. That's a possible LOS from the LMG here, and I think he does fire at him at DD4. Very long range fire. Look, 11 hexes within LOS, no hindrances whatsoever. That's one heck of a shot. He can actually fire up to 16 with that thing, so he can cover the entire left-hand side of the map from that location. A little LMG, 1-2, can really dish out some damage at the with a decent roll. But I think he starts rolling 8s, and I think he'd rolled doubles and was final fire. My big stack's coming. He'll get revealed here in just a sec, so be patient with me. Thank you. Other units on the right-hand side, my 9-2 coming off board. Due to all these units being broken, I could just bring him straight on and make it to that hill. I got really lucky that I could get to that hill one turn earlier. He advanced fires, casual reduces that unit, and then the advanced fire phase, at the end, the smoke will spread, and so now I've got a nice wall of smoke. Remember your wind rolls. If there is wind, remember that you have some drifting smoke and use that to your advantage. Also, remember that even though these British units here have an smoke exponent of 2, because the mild breeze is going from the bottom to the top, you may not place smoke against the wind. So D1, E1, and F1 are not smokeable hexes from this particular unit here. In his own hex or drop behind him, he can drop and smoke those hexes to give cover from guys behind him. But essentially you won't be able to smoke yourself in advance and then move behind or through that smoke to get to your destination. So that's why the mortars, the 2 mortars you have, are key in laying down big smoke screens like that. Especially if the smoke screen would change, and that would be a horizontal blockage of the smoke. So that's great. That's a good thing going on there. And continuing to fire. Let's move through this. He routes from there. That's all this smoke. Even though they're in LOS, it's a straight shot, so he's not getting close to any enemy units. That's the same distance to all of them, so he'll get to the stone buildings, which is not good because that's even more units actually getting a free movement phase, getting close to his location. All the other units move to that wooden building. And here comes Quillen on the left-hand side. This is my big boy. And so they're not cloaked, they were just kind of messed up. So bear with me on that. Again, most are combat here, advancing units up. All those units, because they advanced here. Oh, he may have. Yeah, I guess he should have. He should have lost his concealment here, to be honest with you, because this is a good order unit from Jorg in that building in K3. So that was a miscue that we had. I should have seen that. I didn't, and his concealment technically should be lost, and that could make a big difference. So a couple concealment attempts, going straight into some rally phase for the German. What happens? He rolls snake eyes in that 238, battle hardens, hero creation, and that's bad. And then the other unit below him also rallies under DM. So now this whole stack goes from having one heroic leader to having a full stack of units and an additional leader on the side. And all my units are just jumping out in front here in open ground, hoping to make some good moves by the time this guy rallies. And unfortunately, everything rallies and he gets a hero on top of that. That's what we love about ASL, is crazy stuff like this can happen. And now I've got guys just waiting to gun down. Luckily, I've got a smoke screen over here protecting these guys. Obviously, well, you got a plateau from J2, but it's not good. Not good for these guys out in the open. They're just going to be stuck. I've got units here that if he wants to move up, he's just going to obliterate. But let's see what happens to the rest of the units. I think he tries a couple more rallies. Oops, wrong section. Sorry about that. He prep fires on the 457. Only a 12-2 shot. He evaporates him. Follows up with a rate of fire on the medium machine gun. Destroys that stack, causes an ELR failure. Follows up with another shot on the left-hand side over here. Gets a result and pins most of those units over there. Of course, my heavy machine gun and my mortar, which because I'm pinned, I may not be able to mantle and then fire my prep fire phase, which is huge because I need that smoke going. Final fire, defensive fire on those units there. I try to get some acquisition from my mortar, even though it's through that smoke that I placed earlier. I need something, hopefully waiting for that crit. Route phase, see those units retreat back to that Wadi out of LOS. And then Allied turn 5 comes. Attempted rally in Q5 to no effect. These units here are coming on hard and strong. Macaulay here with his stack of 648s, still concealed, hopefully going to try and make an assault. McGurk actually got injured in a shot, so now this guy's a 6+1 effectively. Having a 5 morale, he's going to be needing 4s just to rally. That's with a leader. I think so. Actually, it wouldn't even behoove me to have McGurk there. He could self-rally at a 5 or self-rally at a 4. Continuing with prep fired shots. A couple units here. Got to prep on this unit here to hopefully break him so I can start moving in that direction. I deploy these units here to split that guy up so I can maximize my support weapon usage, and possibly if one breaks, the other guy just picks it up. So I split those units, and that's what I'm doing in that case, because now the HMG is the only thing that's going to save me. All prep fire with no effect. I start assaulting over here with his 447, get off that hill. He gets blasted by the guys in the village. Other units advance upon that hill, coming from the top. All my LMGs with their massive firepower. Hannafin comes behind him, drops to a spot where they can route to. I want them to route to this location instead of back there, in case he jumps on the hill here and blasts me. So these units route destination. I'm setting up to be over here with Hannafin, because I'm pretty sure they're going to break. Macaulay on the bottom hill makes his moves. First fires again. He's on second level. Opportunity fires from the Germans. Defensive fires up there. Takes his best shot and has no effect. And I run the backside of the hill here. Why do I run back here? Because it costs too many movement factors to go into BB4. I can go into CC5 and then advance into BB4 and get that terrain from there, instead of having to move here and being shot by these units on that level 3 location. Back here, I can't be seen. Oh, that looks like an LOS. That's pretty close. So, but it looked like it was going to block it, so my opponent didn't take that shot. So I got lucky there, honestly. That would have been a -2 shot too. Bree runs up the hill with his stack of units. Everyone runs behind the smoke, takes advantage of that smoke placement early, and turn 5 defensive fire phase. Actually, probably that's what he's doing. He saved his medium machine gun for that stack over there. Rips those guys a good one. Pins and breaks half those guys over there. I've got to route with them because I've got no other choice now that they're broken. Route while they're still alive. Units enter crest status, so I could fire upon that hill with just something. Everyone else advances on the hill. Make standard advances into these good locations here. Up on the hill here, second level, so I can shoot down in this location, and maybe even long range fire over to our victory hexes over there. So the more units I can try to bring to bear, the better, because I don't have a lot of concentrated firepower, and every 4+1, 4+2 shot I can get, I'll take. Units are breaking left and right. His unit in the center right here, breaking our units. Our mortar, which is out again, can't fire any smoke when he's broken, which is going to be a huge detriment. He smacks this guy right in the middle. Why does he shoot the guy in the middle? To break up this massive fire group of 18 firepower factors. Now it's going to be 2 6+2s on him. So breaks this unit here. Great target selection there to disrupt my counterattack capabilities. So bravo on that specific shot. He prep fires those particular units. He attacks another unit, probably with a rate of fire. Kills him, probably outright. More prep fire up on the hill. break some more British units or the Irish units. Zooming back out in case there's some other defensive fire. Right there. So he did happen to roll a 7 for a sniper. My sniper activated with a wound roll and did select his 9-2 leader. And he did not die from the shot, which he got lucky, or unlucky in this case. So now what's going to happen, since that leader's wounded, their movement factors going up that hill is going to be severely curtailed. Now it's going to be 4 movement factors here. Instead of a 2 hex move, it's pretty much 1 hex moves, because he's essentially going to be a 5 portage point weapon for them to haul up that hill. So that I got lucky there in terms of slowing down that troop by at least a turn. So other units continue to final fire to no effect. I did encircle the unit in the building here. About the only thing I really can do. Fire with this 457 here, this direction, on this hex side. As you can see, oops. Fire from this 457 penetrating this hex side here, and my mortar on the right hand side here follows that exact shot directly after that attack from that direction, enters the opposite hex side, which causes encirclement. That's going to help me try to break him later on. Now all units in there will have a 1 lower morale and be subject to +1 outgoing fire, which is going to, I got to take what I can get. At this point, all my units are breaking and dying. It's I've got to take every little bonus that I can get. So continuing on. I wish I wouldn't click there. There we go. More defensive fire. Got routes, standard routes to safe locations. He advances up on the hill. We've got some Allied turn 6 prep fire phase. Repair on the mortar, which is great. So I did get a repair on that. One miscue I make here, and it's actually kind of a big one, is the mortar is firing at this location here. Let's zoom in. If we could zoom in not too far. It's going to be too close. So this mortar fires to that location. Normally the mortar can see that 3rd level hill hex, but because there are no units in crest status or at that level, any units in the depression outside of LOS are not subject to area target type attacks. So for those units that are in that wadi to be subject to attacks, somebody must be at the crest status or at that level higher, in case, like, if you're in a entrenchment. So even though I can see that hex, I cannot fire on those units with area target type. And that's a mistake that we made during the game, and I happened to actually roll a critical hit, and a lot of those units kind of exploded. A lot of them broke, as you see. I don't think anyone CR'd, and well, maybe they did. So he may have lost some units inadvertently, which is unfortunate, because you hate to screw up a rule. But that's one of those kind of odd ones you don't really come across a whole lot. Subsequent fire, or not subsequent fire, but fire the HMG at the unit adjacent. I end up breaking him and ELRing him. Units on the right side. It is now turn 6. So at this point, we'll go to the end of the turn. Standard prep fires. Movement phase. He fires in the unit there, blasts him in the open. The only thing I can do is kind of crawl across those areas as I can. I'm trying to get these units on the bottom right hand side to a little higher elevation, because here's my mediums. I got my mediums and my lights. These are going to be my long range weapons, which is going to be putting some death fire on any particular units that want to stick their heads out on this hill over here, because that range is about 12, and even if it's not 12, I'm going to get half firepower. With my -2 leader will be enough to hopefully destroy or break some of those units by the time my flanking force makes it to that hill. So he's recouping those guys. He's just blasting these guys at his whim. As I move around, Bree moves to help those units that are prep fired already for later on. Firing some more units. He defensive fires. That stack of units has just been broken and rebroken so many times, it's not even funny. No over here simply because I got lucky and I broke this unit in S1. That allows Quillen and his squad and a half to CX it to the base of this hill. I got to get over there. If I didn't break that unit, they would just be shot down in cold blood out in the open ground. So I got lucky with that shot there. Gave him an opportunity to run across the open ground. I had to leave that broken unit behind, but I have no time left. It is turn 6. There's only 5 turns left. 4 more turns of movement after this. And it will take me at least 2 turns of movement to get up the hill. And then I've got 2 turns of combat maximum up on that hill. So my 447 on the back side, sneaking up, sneaky as he is, coming away. As you see his approach, goes through one gully or wadi and makes it up the back side. He's got to follow that wadi because it's too many movement factors to move around. Continuing on, our LMG units are broken. Sorry you couldn't see them. LMG units break and rally back to Hannafin out of LOS. So hopefully I can get those guys up and running. He routes to that wadi. I make some standard advances, move units in range on the edge of the hill. Big leaders. Bree moves up on top of the level 2 hill here to start firing down at these guys in the village before and to cover their advance back up on the hill in case the Germans wanted to make a break for it. So Raleigh phase in that stack over there for those Germans. He gets most of those, all of his multi-man counters up and his single-man counter, looks like. So those guys are good to go. And I think one leader died or something. Maybe one. No, it looks like he's okay. So they're good to go. Technically, that is overstacked. We didn't catch it earlier. So I guess since I critted him and he was moving overstacked, you might say they kind of counter each other. The unit here in the wadi, even though he's in the wadi, I think he might be safe. He is just subject to fire to Quillen because he is on a higher level and he can see straight down that gully. And he's going to be shot at, hopefully from him, and hopefully get killed. So that's what probably we're doing there, kind of rearranging stuff. Other units on top of the hill, he breaks. Old Fetz. Who's that, Fetz? Yeah, Fetz in the middle of the village from W2. Blast all those units on Bree on top of the hill with those 2 squads. Just not a good day for the Irish. And machine guns open up on top of that hill there. Other units prep fire. And he advances on that left-hand side to get those level 4 locations. I defensive fire in the gully because I can't see anybody else because these guys here are in wadi gully locations. They're wadis, like I said, interchangeable at this point. And then final fire, that unit malfunctioned the mortar, and follow up with a HMG shot and break, wound both of his heroes, which is good. More defensive fire shots, same location, no effect. I'll break one guy in the middle. And then route phase, that unit routes back up and out. And he advances into crest status. Again, his medium machine guns may fire from crest status because they are wadis. So now he's got a bunch of units there ready to fire on Quillen on this center location. He's got these guys ready to set up and destroy me as I come up. That's not looking pretty. But I try to get up there as fast as possible. Let's see what I can do. Other units DM and rally in locations. I can't afford to move them back. He attempts to self-rally. One of you gets shot and broken there. I don't believe I prep fire over here. Yeah, I think the HMG prep fire there. Yeah, he prep fired there and broke one unit. Pin the medium machine gun, which is, pin both of those units, which is huge. And then we've got our other unit on this side. We've got Macaulay firing the medium machine gun, probably at a little bit long range, probably 12 to 13 hexes, getting those minor shots because he's on 3rd level, and we could shoot this guy on 4th level right here. Actually, he is on 3rd level, and this unit here is on 4th level. So those are an LOS to our Macaulay over here. Long range fire probably. Let's check it. Yep, 13 hex range, long range fire, but it's a 2 even and a 2-2 on the crest units because it's outside his crest defensible status. And so I break a couple units there. Some of these units in the village are pretty much done. Now at this point in the game, let's go through the first fight. Let's go to the end of the game, and then we're going to do a reevaluation. I got to move Quillen up. I had to move this unit, assault move into this location, draw some fire, move Quillen on the backside to get subject to a little bit less fire. Unfortunately, both those units break from an excellent roll from those Fallschirmjägers. Move my 2nd line unit up to hopefully he'll get up there and get somebody in close combat. And he survives all fire, so we have 1.5 squads at the victory hexes. And everybody else is over here defending those particular hexes over there. Let's finish the defensive fire phase. Again, German firepower, even though it's at 5, actually 8 in this case, is extremely effective in breaking my British / Commonwealth Irish units all over the place. But yet they still pop back and rally and get to that front line. Unfortunately, Hannafin back here, not so lucky. Let's go Ally turn 7 close combat phase. I jump my 247 to melee over here. Now you might think, Stu, why are you doing that? He's got units here, you got units here. Why not jump into the pin area? One, they're pinned and they are, let's evaluate this. This unit here is going to be in melee. He's going to have me only at 2 to 1, and I'm going to be at 1 to 4. I'm not really worried about that. I need to get him into close combat so he can't fire point blank fire on my 447. As soon as I jump him into close combat, he loses crest status at the end of that turn. And is subject to bad close combat. Let me see if you could flip that. No, you can't flip that. If you enter close combat, actually it's from the opposite side, so it's not that big a deal. Close combat units in crest usually gives you a huge bonus, but you have to enter from their area fire side to get that bonus. So in this case, no bonus was allocated. But he's only firing 2 to 1. I'll take that chance. These units here, he's still an 8-1 leader. These guys are half firepower. That's still 3 to 2. I don't expect to survive the next round. But why did I move here? Well, even if I survive here, this unit's crest is the opposite direction of where my units are. My 447 here is going to be subject to area fire from these guys, and the medium may not even fire that direction. So the only people that can fire are these 2 units, which is going to be ends up being a 3-shot on that particular unit. And that's just Hamada, so it should be a 3 firepower -1, which should be easily, an average roll might be a pin task check. So that's a better defensible position. So he enters that close combat. We both roll 11s. The melee continues, and the rally phase for this turn. But let's evaluate really quick on where we are in this scenario. Evaluate where you are in the scenario to determine your next moves. Turn 8. You say, plenty of time, Stu. We got plenty of time to get up on that hill. Well, as you saw, it took me from turn 3 to turn 8 to get to the hill. So all of these units on the side are essentially only going to be support units firing on the hill. The HMG is not going to make it to the hill. He's only going to be able to fire and hopefully break those units if they remain in crest status. These units on the right hand side are not going to be able to make it to, well, we've got this hill defended pretty much. He's not going to get this hill, but they're covering this roadway here just like the Germans covered the roadway for me. I've got them covered, so these units in the center village cannot make it to hill 766. This unit center is broken, unlikely to make it up there in 2 turns because just the movement costs to get up and out. And since he's going to be moving uphill on my side, this HMG, firing at any of these hill locations as he moves up them is going to subject him to minus, movement in the open essentially. So very high risk movement, plus subject to Macaulay over here on the right hand side. So as it stands right now, the only units that really have an effect in this scenario are going to be this guy's out of it in the upper right. He's out of it. LMG's broken units gone. Even if they rally, too far out of the real fight. The only fight is right here, right now. A full 2.5 German squads versus a 2.5 British Commonwealth squads with a leader. This is almost even up, except I'm broken. Units on the right hand side, long range fire if they should happen to move out of the area. So the entire game at this point boils down to these 4 or 5 hexes. Actually, there's a broken unit here, so he's got a ton of guys. So let's burn through some. I'm going to skip some of the defensive fire in the rest of the map here, although there's some interesting combat. I'm going to burn through the German turn. Units rally, and some don't. German prep fire. Sees no effect. I happen to DM that guy in there just to keep him DM so he won't ever rally again. All those 3 units final firing the guys in the middle, again just for posterity's sake. And then on top, again, if those guys break in the village, it's not going to help him. It's not really going to hurt him. But the units on top do make a difference. And I defensive fire my 447 over here on those bad boys right there with I believe no effect. And then he tried to jump into melee with me, but because you're in crest status, you must drop out of crest status before you could advance into the location. You cannot advance from crest in one hex into the next hex. So you have to drop down first, and the next turn you could do your normal advances. So he's delayed 1 turn advancing out of that hex. Close combat again in that hex. I need to pray. I roll an 11. He rolls an 8. No effect. We're still in melee. And then again, standard rallies, not going to really have an effect. Just trying to pound those Germans in the center. A lot of them break. Yeah, they all break, and only the heroes are left remained broken. Prep fire everybody on the bottom right hill to the village. No effect because they're in stone buildings. They're just incredible. That's one heck of a defense he's put up there. Prep firing on the right hand side from the hill, trying to break those units. No effect. I actually rally one of those units from Hannafin. Starts to assault the hero bunker, I call it, because he's been unscathed the entire time, broken and re-breaking. Pinning units up there has no real effect. He has to surrender in the center simply because no route paths and he's adjacent to an enemy unit, so he's out of the fight for sure. And just continuing on, we've got the advance phase. Units try to advance down here in the village, try to make things interesting, just jamming units in there to make it exciting last turn for these guys. Sort of like the game within a game. Units that have no impact in the fight for the most part because their range won't be able to make it over to the other hill. Decided to kind of make it exciting. So he attacks me in a close combat, casual reduces me, and he gets a good shot out of that. Those guys remain in melee. Up top, same sort of thing. Those guys are going to end up, he self-rallies 1 unit, tries to attack my adjacent unit, malfunctions his weapon. No effect. Tries to prep guys over here, CRs him, breaks him, and just decimates these units up on the hill. It's so incredible, the accurate German fire. 8 firepower, just crazy. 8 plus 1 just goes a long way. So defensive fire whatever units I can. Again, the top right is what we're going to skip. Defensive fire, more units break. Okay, down on this side over here, they are getting fired up. My sniper happens to activate and jumps and enters this particular in the melee hex. What type of coincidence is that? He jumps in the hex and breaks that German unit. So that's going to be wonderful for me. And my other unit final fires on the medium, breaks him. So it's looking real tight on top of that hill. Those units route back. He cannot route out of the melee. He has to withdraw. He does advance that other 548, which he planned on doing last turn in there, which is great to hopefully cover that broken unit's retreat. He does end. He jumps both those units in there. One happens to be CX, but he'll take that modifier to keep him alive. I try to attack the broken unit. He does get out and gets access to Tish from this location here. I miss my roll, and he does miss his roll. And in this melee over here, the 238 rolls a snake eyes. I miss. He kills me and gets an 8-1 out of it. Even tougher to take. Even tougher to take that village. I mean, that is one bear of a village. I think he's only lost a half squad from that village. Just incredible fighting over there. Just back and forth fighting. So let's advance. See what's going on here. We're going to skip this top part up here. Like I said, pretty much just firing back and forth. He engages his heroes in melee here because pretty much has nothing else left to do. Fires point blank on these other units here. I try to move up on him, break eventually. And let's just try and get past the advanced fire phase. Again, everyone in the village is pretty much inconsequential because there's only 2 turns left. No one can make it to any of these level 4 hexes except for these guys up here. I opportunity fire so I can get Quillen in the hex because he's in melee. And the other unit can't see me because he's in the wadi here. And that makes it broken units, and those guys are not good order. So I opportunity fire to move Quillen in there to be able to use a possible shot. I do fire upon them, and everybody breaks. And you say, Stu, why'd you do that? Now he's just going to run away. There's no way you're going to kill those units now. But you must notice that they are in melee and they cannot route out of a melee hex. They have to withdraw, which allows me to enter that melee and hopefully finish those guys off. So again, a couple melees, a couple moves over here. Hannafin makes his way over there with another squad. We jump those heroes like crazy. Let's back up here, make sure to get everything on here. Finally get to that hex. I mean, that's just one crazy hex. And let's look at Quillen. Bottom left, this is the game down here. So Quillen jumps in with one squad, and the other squad moves to the bottom portion over here. And say, Stu, why are you doing that? Because I need to get close to. First of all, I need to DM that unit because he wasn't DM'd before, and because moving from L6 to M7. M6 has no LOS to N6, so when I advance in that hex with Quillen, they're not an LOS to adjacent hex. So Tish does not become, his multi-command counter does not become DM'd. Only by moving my unit from L6 to M7, which is the 457, does he become DM'd. So I need to keep that unit minimized. He needs to roll 4 for rally, and hopefully he will not rally. Quillen by himself should be able to decimate these units. And they cannot retreat back to Tish's hexes because he's adjacent to this enemy unit. He's got to go to a different location. So I continue. Let's go to the close combat in this particular location. They've got to withdraw from melee. Withdraw from melee is a -2. And because he's broken, it's an additional -2. So with my attack, I'm looking at a 1-2. Yeah, because I've got 5 firepower with Quillen. That's going to be a 1-2 -5, and I need a 7 for a kill, and I roll a 6. Both of those units are eliminated. My half squad has done his duty. His wonderful, Victoria Cross coming across there, pinning both those units down there and taking fire like crazy, has allowed Quillen and the 447 to take that hex from the Germans. Just a wonderful, wonderful attack by that 247. Wind change occurs, attempts to rally here, misses the rally on the 8 morale unit. So what turn are we on now? Turn 10. you say, Stu, game's over, right? Stop what you're doing. He did self-rally the 238 here. So, although he's not in a level 4 location, he does have options. So the only option he has, again, we're going to forego worrying about the rest of this combat because it has no effect. This is the last turn. The only effect that it does have is this 238 can go to a couple locations. He needs to make it a P6, or he needs to make it to this location or this location and make it the crest status. Well, that's not going to happen from where he is here. He's got to go to N5. He's got to go to N5 for 2, 4, 6, and then advanced phase and crest status. But if he goes that way, he's going to be shot by coolant point blank at 8 minus 3. And then you're looking at a 4 and 8 minus 2 from that location. So unlikely to happen there. He could advance down the hill to 05, P5, P6. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then advance to P6. But looking at the map again, the only thing we need to worry about are the medium machine guns. You see here that I've got an HMG sitting here, ready to shoot him up if he goes into P5. That'll be a 6 minus 2 shot. Over here with Macaulay, guy's long range, that's probably going to be 12 hexes. That'll be a 4 minus 4 into P5. Not good odds. So, what are his chances of getting up there? Actually, when you look at it, it's very good. So, the one thing we're missing here is his other movement option. And what's his other movement option? Let's ignore these guys. Those guys are moving. We needn't worry about those guys. His only movement option is to climb. Climbing gives him huge advantages. One, his climbing counter puts him at a vertex right here, at the vertex between P6, 07, and 06. Now, these units may not fire on him, have no access to that shot, no LOS. The medium machine gun on the right hand side has no LOS to that location either, regardless of whether or not this hill was in the way. No LOS to the location. The only unit that could possibly have LOS is this unit here, but at this point he has no LOS because he's on a climb 2 counter, which puts him on the same elevation as 05, which this HMG has no LOS to. So the only time this unit will become an LOS from the 6.4, the HMG here, is if he climbs to that second level or the next level up. So if he happens to make his climb, he'll be climb 3. This unit will be able to fire on with that 6 machine gun factor, but that's the only unit that can see him on the entire map. So using your climbing, you can get up that hill. Now, how do you climb? Very simple. Cliff, roll 2 dice, announce you're going to climb counter, you put him at the base level of what he's at. Time 2, and normally you have to roll less than a 10. A 10 or 11 means you may not advance up or down, you just stay on the climb counter, and a 12 means you take casualties. So in this case, since there's a heavy wind, my opponent rolled wins, and heavy winds, that will add 1. So my opponent needs to roll an 8 or less with 2 dice to be able to climb on that hill. Not a bad choice, not a bad chance, but unfortunately he happens to roll a 10, add 1 to make an 11, and therefore may not advance on to that next higher level. So in the movement phase, if he had made his roll, he would advance to the level 3 climb, and then he'd still be CX. He'd be on the climb counter. He can't carry the immediate machine gun. He would have been on the climb counter, defensive fire on. In the advanced phase, you may advance to either location here or here, and then become CX in the process. So if he advanced here, obviously he wouldn't win, but the advanced phase, he would advance here, become CX, and then have his unit on that level 4 location. The only thing he'd have to do after that is wither the 4 minus 1 shot from here and the 6 plus 1 shot down below, possibly even 8. So even though he didn't make his roll, he still would have had to undergone some excessive extra fire, but he still would have gotten that unit on top of that hill. So take a very safe route. His climbing would have been the safest route. Excellent choice for my opponent to choose a climb, and he luckily got a self-rally on that and gave him that opportunity to keep him in the game. Even though he was completely annihilated from this location, that one unit is all he needed to win the game. So unfortunately he didn't make his climb, and that was his last movement phase, and that caused the end of the game. It was actually a really fun game, even though the terrain was kind of treacherous. Lots of maneuvering and nice hero creation and leader creation throughout the game. Lots of nice little battles that you fire on. Lots of long range LOSs. Very interesting scenario. Very simple to play. Very simple to play. So don't be afraid of some particular desert scenarios that do not have the armor. And seek out some of the desert scenarios that may have board 25 or some of their weird rules. But a scenario like this technically is a desert scenario, and but it's very fun, very thought-provoking. We made a few critical errors, but they were on both sides, and great game. Hope you enjoyed it. Please leave comments, whether good or bad, doesn't matter. I just like to improve, and I like to look forward. We may be going back to Norway, maybe Normandy, and maybe even other locations to continue the fight. So until next time, friends, I will catch you later, and have fun gaming.